Hello, and welcome to the plagiarism module of the Information Integrity Training Program. This session will introduce you to a definition of plagiarism from the University of Oxford. The definition states, plagiarism is presenting someone else's work or ideas as your own, with or without their consent, by incorporating it into your work without full acknowledgement. All published and unpublished material, whether in manuscript, printed, or electronic form, is covered under this definition. Plagiarism may be intentional or reckless or unintentional. Under the regulations for examinations, intentional or reckless plagiarism is a disciplinary offense. End quote. Oxford 2021. This definition is worth examining for a number of reasons, among them how broad it is. An examination also gives the opportunity to provide examples of how complex avoiding plagiarism can be. The Oxford definition explicitly includes ideas. There is a traditional German song that says, thoughts are free.
Die Gedanken sind frei, wer kann sie erraten? Sie fliegen vorbei wie nächtliche Schatten. Kein Mensch kann sie wissen, kein Jäger erschießen mit Pulver und Blei. Die Gedanken sind frei.
The person who wrote the original lyrics is unknown, but Hofmann von Fallersleben created a popular version in 1842. According to the English Wikipedia article, quotes, Die Gedanken sind frei, end quote. This means that a reference to a published version of the song is possible, even if a reference to the original is not. In terms of modern German copyright law, the song's lyrics are no longer protected, but the Oxford definition of plagiarism would still require a reference. The question the song raises is whether thoughts are indeed free, or whether they have some measure of protection in the modern world. Under modern copyright law, only the expression of ideas is protected. Patent law and trademark law are equally restrictive. This means that the Oxford definition of plagiarism goes beyond legal requirements. Many people who have good commercial ideas would like to prevent others from taking them. It may be the economic value of the ideas that matter to Oxford's definition. It is difficult to measure whether ideas have been plagiarized without considering the concrete expression of those ideas. Leibniz and Newton famously came up with modern calculus independently and simultaneously. Was that plagiarism, or was it a coincidence that two thinkers came up with the same mathematical tool at the same time? There is no evidence of their copying the idea or interacting beforehand. Historically, it makes no difference, but practically, it serves as an example of how an idea can occur simultaneously in different places to different people. There are modern examples also. The similarity between many of the commands in the original Microsoft DOS operating system and the commands in CP/M is striking. The same is true for many of the commands in various versions of Unix and Linux. The commercial value of using familiar commands to initiate familiar actions is hard to deny. Under the Oxford definition, any of these could be an example of the plagiarism of ideas, but most people today would not take that seriously. A claim that someone has plagiarized ideas will likely fail unless the complainant has the financial resources and the will to push the issue in court. In the academic world, ideas themselves are still generally regarded as free. Whether plagiarism counts as unintentional is difficult to measure or prove. An author who obtained a copy of someone else's unpublished manuscript could plagiarize parts of it, and judges tend to assume that opportunity, that is, access to the work, establishes guilt. A person who has had a chance to read or to hear some portions of an unpublished manuscript might have memorized passages or made notes. That could count as evidence of guilt, as could talking with the author or hearing about a work from others, depending on the exact number and sequence of duplicated words, but without evidence that a person actually saw the manuscript for a sufficient length of time. The argument that plagiarism took place requires the assumption that two people could never have had similar thoughts simultaneously. One of the ways in which unintentional plagiarism can occur is when a non-native speaker looks for linguistically correct phrases to use in a foreign language. In general, that language is English, since it is the most widely used language for scientific and scholarly publication and the most widely spoken second language in the world. Typically, native English speakers will judge the quality of writing by whether it, quote, sounds correct. But someone who is not a native speaker may have to resort to seeking examples to get a better sense of the correctness of a phrase. This can lead to accidental and unintentional plagiarism when an editor or reviewer or software programmer finds too much overlap with one or more texts. A conscious effort to look for correct phrases in a wide variety of sources can help, but there is no sure way to avoid this. Even native speakers with good verbal memories can borrow phrases from a writer whose style seems appealing. Simply repeating factual statements can become risky. The factual statement that Berlin is the capital of Germany gets 227,000 hits in a Google search on 1st May 2021. A phrase that is used so often cannot realistically be considered plagiarism, and of course the University of Oxford would not seriously accuse someone of plagiarism based on that 6-word phrase. The problem is that the Oxford definition sets no boundaries and provides no metrics for what counts as plagiarism. It is the equivalent to telling drivers not to drive too fast without specifying what the speed limits are. The Oxford definition calls for full acknowledgement of the original. But what constitutes full acknowledgement can itself be controversial. A simple reference to the name of the author suffices in informal settings such as a lecture, though the published form of a lecture probably needs more specifics. In an era where sources were always printed, the expectation was that a complete reference includes page numbers. The exact date and place of publication matters, too, for books with multiple editions. In the digital world, page numbers do not exist for many works. The substitute is a link that gets a person to where a search for a quote should be possible. Some people view cases where one work quotes or references another source as an insufficient reference because the ideal is a direct reference to the original. A direct reference may not be practical if the work is not available in a local library or if the local library is closed due to COVID or other restrictions. Works that need translation can become an issue. Both the original and the translation ought to have full and correct references, if such a reference exists. Ideally, a translation is also put in quotation marks, even if it is the author's own translation. Using translated materials may seem legitimate if the translation is one's own and if only small portions of text are involved. A program that checks for plagiarism by looking for duplicate words and phrases may not find plagiarism that is mainly a translation. This borders on the issue of idea plagiarism, since it is the meaning that the author is taking, not the actual works. The Oxford definition fails to mention translation plagiarism. Paraphrasing raises many plagiarism issues that the Oxford definition does not discuss. The idea of paraphrasing is to restate content in one's own words without quoting the original because, for example, the original was unclear or needed extra context information. One famous example of paraphrasing comes from the opening of the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. Here is a contemporary translation. Quote, Hegel remarks somewhere that all great world historical facts and personages occur, as it were, twice. He has forgotten to add, the first time as tragedy, the second as farce. End quote. Marx, Goodreads, 2021. Marx does not use quotation marks or give any exact reference. Marx actually attended some of Hegel's lectures in Berlin and may have paraphrased the lecture without looking up an exact source. Was this plagiarism? Certainly Hegel talks about world historical facts and persons, but it is not immediately clear that Marx used Hegel's exact words. The Academic Integrity at MIT website explains that paraphrasing is legitimate when, quote, the author has kept the meaning of the original passage without copying words or structure, end quote, MIT 2021. Nonetheless, avoiding the words or structure of a paraphrase segment may be difficult in technical fields where particular phrases and ways of saying them are part of the standard vocabulary. MIT gives an example of what it considers plagiarism in a text where 15 out of 36 words are duplicated, even though the paraphrase includes the author's name and publication date. This is typical of the modern view of paraphrasing. The Oxford definition says nothing about plagiarism for data or images, but both are possible and as problematic as plagiarizing text. Informal image plagiarism is common, since the internet is rich in images, and many of those images have no provenance record, which makes any full citation difficult. In scholarly works, image plagiarism is a problem because images are often used as a form of data rather than for merely decorative purposes, and not knowing the origin may expose the author to charges of using false information, not just plagiarism. Today, there is a strong push to make data open and available, which should also mean that it can be cited in a standard way. Those taking data without explicitly acknowledging their origin means that readers cannot judge their quality accurately and may think wrongly that the author of an article has created them. Data are at least as unique as words and phrases, and maybe much more so, since the range of possible data types and combinations is essentially limitless. Data are generally the truly unique research contribution, and taking someone else's data without attribution is akin to stealing their work. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to learn more about the topic, stay tuned and watch our next video coming up in this series, which is called What is Originality?